Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This time we're going to get into something a little bit different. We're diving into the world of an artist named Kevin Sharkey, and he's got some pretty strong opinions on Irish identity immigration, what it really means to be Irish in the 21st century.
Yeah, and the really interesting thing is how his own life kind of really shapes those opinions. We've got an interesting mix of material here, a direct interview with Sharkey, several articles that have been written about him, and even some of his artwork. It's like piecing together a puzzle, how his childhood, his art, and even his political views all connect.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not every day you get this level of insight into an artist's mind.
Yeah.
So let's start at the beginning, shall we? Sharkey was born in a mother and baby home in 1961 and then adopted into a white family in rural Donegal.
Now, you might already know a bit about the history of mother and baby homes in Ireland, but what's striking here is that the nuns who arranged Sharkey's adoption actually mentioned a color problem in a letter to his adoptive parents. Talk about a sign of the times.
Wow, that's pretty heavy. It really makes you think about how different societal attitudes were back then.
So how did that impact Sharkey growing up in rural Ireland as a Black child in a white family?
Well, he talks about being both a curiosity and the target of jokes. I mean,
Yeah.
he even remembers this older woman who would always give him a banana instead of the biscuits that she offered his friends. And, at the time, he just wanted to fit in. But looking back, he sees it as her way of taking the piss, which, for those of you not familiar with the term, is kind of this Irish humor that uses teasing and sarcasm to poke fun at, like, authority or social norms. It's interesting how he brings up that idea of taking the piss because it ties into something else. He talks about Phil Lynott, the lead singer of Thin Lizzy.
Oh, yeah.
Lynott, who was also Black and Irish, once said that comments about his skin color weren't racist because they were just part of that broader Irish tendency to tease anyone about anything sort of like equal opportunity teasing, if you will. Does that hold up today?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, while there's definitely a long tradition of wit and banter in Irish culture, the line between affectionate teasing and something more hurtful can get blurry. And let's be real, societal norms have shifted, and we're much more aware of the power dynamics at play.
So context really matters. This actually reminds me of Sharkey's football analogy. He argues that throwing a banana at a Black football player isn't always racist, but could just be part of the rough and tumble of the sport. He calls it banter.
Yeah, see, this is where Sharkey really throws down the gauntlet. He pushes us to grapple with the very definition of racism. Is it all about intent, or is it the impact of the action that truly matters? These are some tough questions.
And you can tell Sharkey is wrestling with them, too. He seems to be on this journey with his views on free speech. On one hand, he values it highly, but he also acknowledges that words can cause harm. He's especially concerned about statements that exclude people, like saying, only white people can be Irish.
It's fascinating to see his perspective evolve. He's grappling with where the line is, between protecting free speech and protecting vulnerable groups from hate speech. It's a debate that's raging not just in Ireland, but all over the world. Do we need stricter hate speech laws? Do they actually work? It's a real conundrum.
Right, and it makes you wonder where Sharkey lands on other complex issues, like immigration.
Well, his stance on immigration is surprisingly nuanced on the surface. He seems to support it, but he's fiercely critical of the way the Irish government is handling it, particularly when it comes to the EU.
Okay, so what's he so concerned about?
He feels that Ireland has basically given up control of its borders to the EU, and that the government isn't being straight with its citizens about the reasons for mass immigration. He's particularly skeptical of the lack of transparency around the economic motivations. He argues that if the government needs immigrants to fill jobs that Irish citizens aren't taking, they should just be upfront about it.
Interesting, but doesn't that open him up to criticism, especially as an immigrant himself?
Absolutely. His critics accuse him of hypocrisy, saying he's basically pulling up the ladder behind him by advocating for stricter immigration policies. It's a tough accusation to shake, right? You've benefited from immigration, so how can you argue for limits on it?
It's definitely a point worth exploring further, but before we get into that, I'm curious to hear more about Sharkey's specific concerns with EU immigration policies. What exactly does he think is wrong with the current system?
Sharkey points to the free movement of people within the EU. That's a major issue. He argues that it's led to uncontrolled immigration, putting a strain on resources and infrastructure in Ireland.
But isn't the free movement of people one of the cornerstones of the EU? I mean, a lot of people see it as a positive thing.
Right, and Sharkey acknowledges the benefits, like, making it easier for people to work and travel across borders. However, he believes the Irish government hasn't adequately planned for the influx of people, especially in areas like housing and healthcare.
So he's not necessarily anti-immigration, but rather pro-smart management of immigration.
Exactly. He's advocating for a more controlled and selective approach, where Ireland sets its own immigration quotas based on its own needs and capacity.
This brings us back to that criticism of hypocrisy. How does he respond to that?
Well, Sharkey argues that his own experience as an immigrant is actually what informs his perspective. He says he's not trying to shut the door on others, but rather ensure that immigration is sustainable and benefits both newcomers and existing residents.
It's definitely a complex issue with no easy answers, and it seems like Sharkey isn't afraid to tackle complex issues head-on, even in his art. You mentioned earlier that he uses his artwork to express his political views. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. You might be familiar with Sharkey's vibrant, colorful paintings, often depicting Irish landscapes or everyday scenes. But if you look closely, you'll find subtle and sometimes not so subtle political commentary woven into the imagery.
So it's not just pretty pictures, there's a deeper message there.
Precisely, for example, he has a series of paintings that incorporate barbed wire motifs, which he uses to symbolize the restrictions and barriers faced by immigrants. He also uses color and composition to explore themes of inclusion and exclusion, challenging traditional notions of Irish identity.
It's interesting how he uses art as a platform to spark conversations and challenge perspectives.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, though, can you truly appreciate his art? If you disagree with his politics, does the message overshadow the medium?
That's the age-old question, isn't it? Can you separate the art from the artist? It's a debate that's been going on for centuries.
And I bet Sharkey has some thoughts on that, too.
Oh, you bet he does.
Yeah.
Sharkey firmly believes that you can appreciate art even if you disagree with the artist's personal views. He draws parallels to figures like Mozart, Picasso,
Yeah.
even Basil Fawlty. He argues that we can still enjoy their work even if we find some aspects of their personalities or beliefs distasteful.
So it's like judging a book by its cover. We might be tempted to dismiss a work of art because we don't like the artist's politics or lifestyle, but Sharkey would say we're missing out on something potentially beautiful or meaningful by doing that.
Exactly. We might be denying ourselves the opportunity to experience beauty, to be challenged intellectually, or to connect with a different perspective. It's like closing ourselves off to a whole world of experience based on preconceived notions.
That makes sense, but it also raises a question for me. If we can separate the art from the artist, does that mean we should just ignore the artist's intentions or the context in which the art was created?
That's where things get really interesting. It's not about ignoring the artist or the context, but rather acknowledging that the art can have a life of its own, independent of its creator.
Yeah.
It can speak to different people in different ways, evoke different emotions, and carry different meanings, depending on who's experiencing it.
So it's not about pretending the artist doesn't exist, but rather recognizing that the art can transcend their individual perspective.
Exactly. The art becomes a conversation starter, an invitation to engage with different ideas and perspectives, even if they challenge our own.
Which is what Sharkey seems to be doing with his own art. He's not shying away from expressing his views, even if they're controversial.
Absolutely. And he's using his platform as an artist to contribute to the conversation about Irish identity, immigration, and what it means to be Irish in a changing world.
He's certainly a unique voice in the Irish art scene. Speaking of which, his foray into politics with Sinn Féin was short-lived, but it's definitely an interesting chapter in his story.
It's almost like Sharkey is allergic to labels. He joined Sinn Féin, quickly realized it wasn't for him, and bounced. He seems disillusioned with the whole political process, like he doesn't believe any party can truly deliver on its promises.
Which might explain why he's chosen art as his main vehicle for expressing his views.
It could be. Perhaps he sees art as a more powerful and authentic way to connect with people and spark change. He's not bound by party lines or political agendas. He's free to express himself in a way that's true to his own experiences and beliefs.
I wonder if that ties into his disillusionment with Sinn Féin. Did he feel like they were trying to use him rather than genuinely listening to his perspective?
That's a great question. He's described feeling like a poster boy for the party, which suggests he felt tokenized, used to represent a certain image rather than valued for his individual contributions.
That's got to be frustrating, especially when you're trying to make a genuine difference.
Yeah.
So where does that leave him now, politically speaking?
It seems like he's taken a step back from formal politics, but remains deeply engaged with social issues. He continues to use his art and public platform to raise awareness and spark debate about the issues that matter to him.
He's become a kind of independent commentator, then not aligned with any particular party, but still very much involved in the conversation.
Exactly, and that independent voice, that willingness to speak his mind regardless of political affiliation, is what makes him so interesting. He's not afraid to challenge the status quo, even if it ruffles some feathers.
He's definitely not afraid to speak his truth. So as we delve deeper into Sharkey's world, we've got to ask, what are the key takeaways from all this? What's the one thing you hope our listener walks away with after this deep dive?
Well, I think for me, it's the idea that identity, especially Irish identity, it's not this fixed thing. It's constantly evolving, right? Shaped by individual experiences, social changes, global influences.
Yeah, and Sharkey's life kind of embodies that evolution in such a vivid way, right? He challenges us to kind of move beyond these simplistic definitions of what it means to be Irish, in the 21st century.
And he reminds us that it's okay to be critical of your own country, even to love it and be critical of it at the same time. That's something we could all learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. True patriotism isn't about blind allegiance, right? It's about wanting your country to be the best that it can be.
It's about holding it to a higher standard.
It's that blend of passion and critique that I find so compelling about Sharkey. He clearly cares deeply about Ireland, but he's not afraid to call out the things that he sees as wrong or unjust.
He's definitely a voice that demands to be heard, even if it makes some people uncomfortable. And that's a valuable thing, in any society, to have those dissenting voices, those who challenge the status quo and push us to think differently.
It's like he's throwing a grenade into our comfortable assumptions and forcing us to re-examine, everything.
And sometimes that's exactly what we need. A good shakeup, a fresh perspective, a reminder that the world is complex and messy and there are no easy answers.
It's definitely been a thought-provoking deep dive. Sharkey's experiences and views offer such a unique perspective on those big, thorny issues of identity, immigration, and social change.
Yeah, I mean, what strikes me most is his courage. He's willing to stand up for what he believes in, even if it means facing criticism or being labeled as controversial.
He's not afraid to rock the boat. Maybe that's what makes him such a powerful artist. His work doesn't just reflect the world, it challenges it.
Exactly. He's using his art to spark conversations, to provoke thought, and ultimately to inspire change. And that's a pretty amazing thing.
It makes you wonder, what kind of impact will his work have in the long run? Will he be remembered as a visionary, a provocateur, or something else entirely?
Only time will tell, right? But I think he's definitely leaving his mark on the Irish cultural landscape. He's forcing us to confront those difficult questions, about who we are, where we're going, and what kind of society we want to create.
And those are questions that every society needs to be asking itself, not just Ireland.
Yeah.
So even though this deep dive focused on Kevin Sharkey's experiences in Ireland, I think there are universal themes here that resonate far beyond any one country or culture.
Absolutely. His story speaks to the human desire for belonging, for understanding, and for a voice, and shaping the world around us. It's a story about finding your identity, challenging norms, and using your platform to make a difference.
It reminds us that even in a world that can feel increasingly divided, there's still room for nuance, for complexity, and for those who dare to kind of challenge the status quo.
Beautifully said. Sharkey's story is a reminder that there's always more to learn, more to explore, and more to question. It's an invitation to dive deeper, into the messy, fascinating world of ideas and perspectives, even if it makes us uncomfortable.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Kevin Sharkey, I'm left with one final thought. What does it mean to truly listen to someone whose views you might not agree with, to engage with their ideas in a way that's respectfully thoughtful and open to the possibility of changing your own mind?
That's the challenge we all face, isn't it? To move beyond our own echo chambers and engage in meaningful dialogue with those who hold different perspectives. It's not always easy, but it's essential if we want to create a more understanding and compassionate world.
And maybe that's the greatest legacy Kevin Sharkey will leave behind, not just his art, but the conversations that he sparks, the questions that he raises, and the challenge he presents to us all to think critically, to embrace complexity, and to never stop questioning the world around us.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So to our listeners, thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We hope this exploration of Kevin Sharkey's world has sparked some new ideas and inspired you to continue diving deep into the complexities of life and art.
Until next time, keep those minds open and those questions
Totally. And, just to be upfront here, we're not here to tell you what to think or to endorse any particular viewpoint. Our goal is to really unpack the ideas, explore his perspective, and hopefully, leave you with some things to ponder.
I like that. Some food for thought.
Exactly.
Because in today's world, it's more important than ever to understand where people are coming from.
Yeah.
Even if you don't agree with everything they're saying.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. The speech starts off, actually, with a story. And it's actually quite funny. He talks about growing up with 5 sisters.
Okay.
And basically, their kitchen was just a battleground of hate speech.
Wow.
He even quotes some of the language they used, and let's just say it was colorful.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
But I have to say, it seems a little out of place. I mean, a lighthearted story in a speech about serious issues.
It does. But what's fascinating is how it kind of sets up his later points.
Oh, interesting.
He's establishing this idea that even amidst, harsh words, maybe even hate speech,
Yeah.
there's this foundation of love and decency.
Ah, okay. So it's like he's saying that words can be harsh,
Right.
but there can still be good intentions behind them.
Exactly. He then goes on to talk about his childhood in Donegal and how accepted he felt, even though he was the only Black child there.
Right.
And this is key, right? He's not just speaking theoretically. This is his lived experience.
Right, exactly.
That lends so much weight to his argument that Ireland isn't and never has been a racist country.
It's a powerful point coming from him.
Oh, absolutely. But here's where things take a turn. The speech goes from personal reflection to a pretty scathing critique of the current political climate.
Oh,
Yeah. He specifically calls out Leo Varadkar.
okay.
And I think it's important for our listeners to know who we're talking about here.
I agree.
Varadkar is a prominent politician,
Yeah.
successful doctor, held high office in Ireland.
Okay, got it. So what does he say about him?
Well, he doesn't hold back. He criticizes Varadkar for labeling anyone concerned about immigration as racist.
Strong words.
Very strong. He goes on to say, and I'm quoting directly here, Ireland has never been a racist country. The people of Ireland have never been racist.
Wow. I mean, those are some bold words, especially coming from someone, who has experienced racism firsthand.
It is, and you can feel that emotion behind those words. Like he feels Ireland's being misrepresented, that the people are unfairly labeled.
Absolutely. You can sense that frustration, right?
Oh, for sure.
That the image being painted doesn't match his reality.
Totally. And this distrust of the political establishment, it's a recurring theme throughout the speech.
I see. So it's more than just Varadkar. It's a wider distrust of the system.
It seems that way. He seems to believe that the government is manipulating people's good intentions, like playing on their desire to be welcoming and compassionate, but ultimately using fear to control them.
So we're seeing this interesting contrast emerge, right? He clearly loves Ireland and its people.
Yes.
But there's this growing distrust of those in power.
Exactly. And that tension, that internal conflict, it's a big part of what makes this speech so captivating. It's not black and white.
Yeah, there are many layers to unpack here.
Yeah.
It's a nuanced exploration of complex emotions.
And challenging ideas.
And it's interesting how he does that, how he brings all these complex ideas together.
Yeah.
He doesn't just rant. It's personal stories, humor,
Right.
He keeps you engaged.
Yeah, totally. And, one of the big ideas that keeps coming up is this concept of individual decency.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
This is where we see his worldview really taking shape.
Yeah.
He argues that at the end of the day, people are either decent or they're not. It doesn't matter about race or religion or sexual orientation.
Right.
Those are all secondary. What really matters is how we treat each other.
And he ties that back to his own life, right?
Yes. He brings us back to that story about his family, all the teasing and bickering. But underneath it all, there was still love and respect.
Exactly. And he's saying that true decency, it's not about perfect words or being politically correct. It's about our actions, the choices we make, how we treat the people around us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He even says, when you get up in the morning, you know what kind of person you are. And when you put your head on the pillow in the evening, you know what kind of person you are.
I love that quote. It's so simple, but so powerful.
It is.
It's like he's saying, just be a good person,
Yeah, and that's what matters. And this emphasis on personal responsibility, it really contrasts with his distrust of the political system.
Oh, yeah, for sure. He doesn't have much faith in elected officials. Thinks they're out of touch with everyday people.
And here's where his humor comes in again. He talks about how there's actually a pub in the government building.
Wait, what?
Yeah, he compares it to a dry cleaner. He asks, would you use a dry cleaner that had a pub in the back?
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Right. It's such a clever way to make his point. The whole situation is just absurd.
Totally. And he keeps going. He criticizes those unelected officials in Brussels, too, about the EU setting immigration quotas.
Right. And this is where understanding the European Union is important. It's a union of 27 countries in Europe. And it does have some say over its members.
like setting policies on things like immigration.
Exactly.
And for the speaker, that feels like a violation of Ireland's independence.
Oh, I see. Like they're losing control over their own country.
Yeah, he even compares it to a new house where someone's forced the doors and windows open.
That's a powerful image.
It is. So it's like he's saying, I believe in being a good person,
Yeah.
but I don't trust these institutions to do what's best.
Exactly. And that leads us to how he sees Africa and immigration, which he tackles head on, with a mix of humor and, some hard truths.
Oh, definitely. He tells the story, imagine being in a mud hut in Africa, and you hear about all the benefits of going to Ireland.
Right.
He says, there'd be skid marks on my driveway to get to Dublin.
Okay, that's funny.
It is, but it highlights the reality, right?
Yeah.
The economic differences that make people leave their homes.
Right? It's a stark reminder of the realities for many.
And he's not afraid to make bold statements. He says, Africa into Ireland won't go.
That's going to get some reactions.
It is. Some might see that as, anti-immigrant.
Huh.
Others might say it's just a realistic look at what a small country can handle.
And that's where it's important to remember what we said earlier.
Yeah.
Our goal isn't to endorse or condemn. It's to understand his viewpoint.
Exactly. It's a complex statement, open to interpretation.
Definitely. It forces you to think critically about the issues.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You have his personal beliefs, social critique, and these economic realities all mixed together.
It's a lot to process. I'm curious what the rest of the speech holds.
As we get to this final part of the speech, it really strikes me how much ground we've covered, from his family to critiques of the government to, global economics. It's a lot. But that idea of individual decency,
Yes.
it keeps coming back. It's really like the core of how he sees the world.
It is. And I think what's so powerful about that idea is it gives you a sense of control.
Right.
In a world that feels so out of control, so much chaos.
He's saying, look, we can't always control what governments do or the global economy, but we can control how we treat each other.
Yeah. It's a message that I think resonates with a lot of people, especially now, with so much uncertainty and division. It's like a reminder that even small acts of kindness, they can make a difference.
They really can.
Yeah.
It's about creating a better world, one person at a time.
And that leads us to his call to action. He urges Irish people to speak out, to not be silenced, even if they make mistakes. He actually says it's okay to say stupid things.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because we're all human.
Yeah.
But he stresses that
Yeah.
at the heart of it all.
Yeah.
There has to be decency.
So it's not about always agreeing or avoiding tough topics.
Right.
It's about honest and respectful dialogue, even when you have different opinions.
Exactly. And he knows that's hard.
Yeah, especially these days, when people are so quick to judge. But he really believes that open dialogue is the only way to overcome these divisions and build a better future.
It's a powerful message. And what's interesting is how he ends on such a hopeful note. He points to all the people at the rally as proof that people want change, that they're ready to speak their minds. He reminds them, this is Ireland. This is our country, and this is how we want to be seen in the world. This is how we want to do business in the world.
It's a strong ending. It leaves you feeling empowered, inspired. He's not just complaining. He's offering a vision for something better.
Yeah, and that vision is rooted in personal responsibility, open discussion, and a real commitment to creating a more just and compassionate society.
And I think that's why this speech is so much more than just politics, It's personal values, social critique, and these real-world economic issues all woven together.
It's a powerful combination, and it clearly resonates with people who feel disillusioned with the political landscape, who are looking for genuine connection and ways to make a positive impact.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to hear from you, our listeners. What stood out to you? Did you agree with the speaker, disagree, maybe a bit of both?
What resonated? What questions did it bring up for you?
We encourage you to share your thoughts on our website or social media. We really want to hear what you think.
And as you continue to process this speech, we want to leave you with a final thought. How do your own experiences shape your views on things like immigration, national identity, and the role of government? It's something to consider.
It is. It's a question that can lead to some real self-awareness and a better understanding of all the different perspectives out there. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.